Thanks for joining this special webinar. I will be very brief in my introduction because I know you didn't come to listen to me, but you came to listen to the two people I'm about to introduce. Today's webinar is dedicated to how Doodles came on Flow with the help of .find. Here speaking today is Doodles founder Poopie and Bjartek, founder of .find, and they're going to walk you through how the process was, take a look a little bit about the tech underneath, and share, all the cool stuff that went on behind porting or creating a Doodles experience on Flow. If you have questions throughout the webinar, make sure you use the Q&A functionality. Most of the questions will be answered at the end if we have time. And if I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and if there's any interesting questions that are particularly relevant, I'll voice them. And if Bjartek or Poopie, if you see some interesting questions as well, feel free to answer them yourselves. Cool. All right. Well, without further ado, I will hand it over to these two legends, and let's get the webinar started.
Thank you, Andrea. So in this talk, we will talk about the fact that Doodles is now live on Flow. And we want to explain how Find helped them on this journey. And we really believe together on the future of Web3, and that Flow is the chain to bring the Doodly experience to the mainstream. So the agenda for today's talk is that we're going to start with brief introduction. First, Poopie is going to introduce himself and Doodles. Then I will introduce myself and .find. Poopie will then go into why they choose Flow, and then hand it over to me, where I would talk more about how we did the cadence part, and then how we did the backend teleportation part. And then we will finish off with a brief discussion about the future of what's going on with Doodles. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Poopie. Who are you and why are you so awesome?
Thank you, Bjartek. Hey, everybody. I'm Poopie, also known as Jordan Castro. I'm one of the co-founders of Doodles. My background is in product management, and I actually got my start working on CryptoKitties at Dapper Labs 4 or 5 years ago. I've been building products in and around the blockchain for 10 plus years. The first product I built was a prediction market for betting on the price of Bitcoin and Dogecoin in about 2013. Biggest learning there is on-chain matters, because we ended up, it wasn't provably fair on chain, and we ended up getting hacked, losing all the users' funds. So we had a chance to do things differently in the past 4 years by putting cats on the blockchain, Top Shot, Cheese Wizards, and now Doodles on the Flow blockchain. Next slide, please. Cool. So how did we get here? We originally wanted to create a DAO focused NFT project. This was one of the first ever slides that we created for Doodles when we were pitching the idea to my co-founder, the artist Burnt Toast. We called it Doodle DAO originally, and after many conversations with lawyers, we decided that we should scale back our expectations and remove the DAO from it. But we still had the aspiration to experiment with governance and coordination of funds. So we created, a community treasury, and then ended up calling the project Doodles. Next slide, please. Cool. So where we're at now, people know us because Doodles is one of the top 10 most traded NFT collections. It's done $500 million in volume traded. The floor price fluctuates. But that's not the only thing about Doodles that I think is cool. We're trying to make our brand and NFTs come to life, and we're trying to speak to an audience outside of the current bubble and the existing space. So a lot of what we believe is that doodling is the most accessible way to be creative. We believe everything starts with the doodle, and we also believe that the best way to reach people is through entertainment and content. But one of our core beliefs and pillars is that, blockchain technology is the future. Maybe not necessarily NFTs per se, but like just the blockchain is the future. And we like to experiment with, NFTs, FTs, Solana tokens, teleportation, to build our product line and then ultimately bring it out to mass consumers. Next slide, please. So yeah, where we're going. We're a company trying to do a lot with very little, but knowing that we think that we could reach masses through entertainment and content, our strategy kind of is aligned with that. But at the core of it, we have a lovable character and IP that has broad mass appeal, and we're going to Trojan horse Trojan horse everybody into blockchain adoption through our characters. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so I am Bjartek, or Bjartek, as I'm known in the Discord community and on the net. I also have many other names. And I joined Flow in 2020 during a boot camp that was called Open World Builders. So I've been around longer than many others in this ecosystem. In OEB, I started off creating a project called Versus. And when Versus was done, it was an auction platform that is currently in hiatus. But when that was done, I needed a new challenge. I'm a technical mind. I need new technical challenges. So I figured, well, we don't have a name service. Let me create a name service. So that was how .find was born. I was on my own at first for the first half year, and I just coded things I wanted to code: a profile, on-chain profile, collection browsing, lots of different things. And I thought a lot about metadata. Metadata was really important, and I didn't like the status of how metadata was expressed on Flow, because back in those days it was a jungle. There was no clear metadata standard. Some people just had a dictionary with a string mapping that was called metadata, but there was no convention. You had to know everything to get things done. So during FlipFest, me and two others, we introduced an on-chain metadata standard, and that got accepted. So that was really cool. And I really love that it's so widely adopted now, and I hope it will continue to grow. I'm also have lots of other merits in the ecosystem, but I'm not going to go into those now. So what is .find? I mean, it's on Find XYZ. We have a name service, as I said, an on-chain profile. We can browse your collections. We have recently added related accounts. And that's really key for Doodles, because as I'm going to explain later, in order to have trust when we want to move assets from one chain to the other, we need a place to store that trust. And the place we store that trust is actually in the related accounts feature at Find. So that's why if you go, for instance, to doodly.find, that is my Dapper wallet, there you will see that I have an Ethereum account that is trusted. I actually think I had 2 Ethereum accounts that are trusted to that account that is duplicated over something from Ethereum. We have a grant for an NFT details page. That page is a generic page that we want everybody to be able to go to and use. It shouldn't have any vendor bias. We have recently created Thoughts, that is basically on-chain Twitter. And we have a marketplace and lots of other things. Then Find also has a corporate arm or an enterprise branch where we help Doodles and Area to come to Flow, basically, with contract standards, best practices, consulting, everything that we need in order to make them have a good experience on their journey. So, Poopie, why did you choose Flow?
Yeah, B-Man, this is the $1 million question. This is a question that we get asked, 1 million times over Twitter. There are many reasons. Like for context, let's talk about the most important thing and what the product is. So Doodles 2 is a customizable PFP. Self-expression is a core pillar of the product. Thus, we need the ability for our users to express themselves endlessly. We have an aspiration to reach the masses. Right now, we're building for tomorrow's audience with Doodles 2. And if you go to the next slide, please, onboarding becomes like a huge consideration. Looking at the entire funnel, how people land at your website, or how they become aware of you, how they land at your website, what they do to convert. Do they have to set up a wallet? Do they have to acquire crypto? Do they have to store their keys safely? Like, these are all questions that we considered. And when we looked at the landscape, there are very good products on EVM, like Magic Link or Magic Wallet, that custody keys, but we needed a end-to-end solution for custodied assets and also payment rails. And Dapper, which is on the Flow blockchain, has been battle tested for years now, and has successfully converted hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. So the second requirement was to make on-chain matter, and this goes back to like who I am, who B-Man is. Like, we have this desire for an on-chain representation of an NFT to kind of parallel real life, to be cool, to actually matter. And when we looked at Solidity and EVM, there are standards for composability, like the 998 standard, and depending on how you implement it, one NFT may be unaware of the other NFT that is attached to it or equipped to it. And when we look at Flow and its resource model, and once we had that paradigm shift of looking at NFTs as resources and resources as containers, then we thought, wow, your Doodle can actually own, its wearables. And maybe we could add functionality and logic that define how wearables can be added. We can say that you can add 10 different rings on each of your finger. And then maybe in the future, we could upgrade that to say you could add 10 rings on one single finger. Now you could have like 100 rings. And the third point here is, it's about scalability. Like, we still have to do a lot of testing with this product. We need to understand session frequency, session duration, how many outfits do people want to buy, how many times do they want to change their outfit, when they change their outfit. But we needed, the requirement was that we need a stack that allows users to endlessly customize it with the requirement that it's on chain. Next slide, please. Cool. And yeah, like, I'm a builder, and even despite not being an engineer, like when I dove into Cadence's documentation years ago, I was really fascinated with being able to apply logic to NFTs, to wearables, to equipment. And I'm really excited to just build a product that mimics everyday life. Like, we all have a cabinet of clothes or a closet of clothes. We decide what we want to wear. Sometimes it's impossible for me to wear two hats. I've never tried. And I feel like the language allows us to mimic that. Next slide, please. Endless customization. This is a product for the masses. People want to express themselves. We plan on implementing thousands of wearables over time as demand grows. And at the end of the day, it should not cost the end user a single penny. But in addition to that, if we can, invisible signing can be a feature to where the end user doesn't need to see a transaction confirmation window, or even try to read code, or even try to read human readable transaction data. Like, that's where we want to go. We want to remove everything from the user and just let them do what they want to do, which is wear a hat without having to go through the context of transactions. Next slide, please. And the payment rails is interesting. We received a lot of pushback for pushing people through through Dapper. Dapper is a preferred wallet right now, and the trade-offs that we thought of were when we start converting the mainstream, later this year, early next year, they're going to be using the Dapper wallet. And we want to make sure that our community who received wearables through what we're about to share with you, we're on the same island of liquidity as the masses. So, and the masses need familiar payment rails. Like they're used to taking out their wallet, taking out their credit card, entering their information and buying the thing. And next slide, please. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so then I'm going to dig in and start being a little bit more technical. So we're first going to start off with talking about the contract, since as Poopie has said, we want to be on chain, so we need contracts and they need to be rich so that we can actually do interesting things on chain. So right now we have some contracts on mainnet and testnet on those addresses that you see over there. And that's actually one thing that is very interesting to Ethereum crowd. I experienced this when I did this project, that on Ethereum, you have the same address on Gurley and on mainnet, right? It's the same MetaMask that you log in with. You just switch the network. But in Flow, that's different. Each address is generated by a different seed, and the seed is different on the different networks. So you can't have the same address on different networks. So that's why we have two addresses, but both of those addresses have the same contracts that are live right now. And the main contracts we have now are the wearables contracts. That's the main NFT contract currently that has all the different bits that we create in the process that I'm going to explain later. And then we have the teleporter. The teleporter is a contract that controls and secures this process of moving something from one chain to Flow in this case. We also have some support contracts. So we have a familiar admin pattern and development pattern at Flow, or at Fine, sorry, where we always do an admin, a debug, and a clock contract. So those are just there to administer a solution, ensure we can debug transactions with events, or mock the clock if we need to. But the templates contract is quite interesting. If you're interested in Cadence, especially on default implementations, I would suggest reading that, because it has some techniques that are really cool. It's the first time we did them at Find in this contract for the templates, and it's really interesting the way you can abstract code with default methods in interfaces. So the wearables contracts, on the left here, you see examples of some wearables, right? These are the product of the process that is a teleportation or a duplicator that we're going to talk about later. Each of them represents a single NFT that the Doodle 2 can equip later. So the Doodle 2 is not live yet. It's going to come, but it's not here yet. All the wearables are based on a template. So all the data for the wearables are kind of predetermined. We just specify that you are an instance of this template, basically, and so we can share a lot of data. Each wearable will have a position. So, for instance, the hoodie here is on the body, or while the pants are on your legs, and the backpack is on your back, or whatever. And we have some positions. We actually have the option in Doodles to add new position and retire positions if we want to, so that in the future we can add more. Like Jordan talked about, maybe we want to have more hand positions, for instance, or more feet, or maybe a companion slot, or whatever we want to. We have the ability to dynamically add new slots that a wearable can be in. They also are in a set. So currently we have the OG wearable set that have unique core and custom names to it, where that kind of classifies all the different wearables. And they can also have tags. Right now they have one tag, but they can have more. For instance, you have a multicolored hoodie over here. Another very interesting concept that we decided to add it in wearables is teleportation context, or creation context. And that is used for provenance. proving or for showing how did something arrive at flow, since this is something that was born or born in the process of moving something from another chain. So we actually store some context from Ethereum, right? The transaction that did it, the user, and the time, so that it is possible to go back and look at how did you arrive. That data is also emitted in the teleportation event. So it is actually very possible to trace and discover all the way from Ethereum and Etherscan to FlowScan over to Flow, how things arrived. And I think that's very important to have these traceable steps here so that it's possible to trace how things originated. And as Poopie has mentioned, on-chain is very important. It's been very important for me, and I was blessed to be able to work with the Doodles team that have the same vision for on-chain metadata. So I'm just gonna, oh, sorry, there was a slide that was gone here, sorry. I was going to talk about metadata, maybe it will come later, we'll see. But the teleporter is the other main contract that we have. So the reason why this is a contract is because on Flow, you have the ability to write transactions. So on Ethereum, when you want to do a mutating operation against the chain, you call a contract and you do a write operation. And that's a single thing. That's the only thing you can do. You can only do one. If you want to do more, you have to go back to JavaScript or whatever and do some more logic, and then you can do another. But on Flow, you can actually compose lots of different both read and write operations into a single transaction. And that, I call that the interaction level, where you're working on code in an interaction level. But since all developers and users really have the ability to do that if they're technical enough, we have made a teleporter contract that has a lot of the logic to make this secure, so that the operations that is a duplication and an open Genesis box that we will talk about later, they are secured on the contract level and not in the transaction level. And that's a really key distinction. Some code should live in the interaction or transaction level, other code should live in contracts. There are technical reasons for that, but there are also convenience and security features for that you should think about. The teleporter also has registries of what has been duplicated or opened before as the last line of defense. So the last security line of defense is that if this box has been opened before and the Flow blockchain knows about that because there was a transaction that succeeded, then that can't happen again. So even if we somehow replay the events again or whatever, there will be no duplicates. Right? We have a guarantee that that will happen on the contract level in code that user then can go in and verify. And finally, the teleporter can only be run by a trusted account. So we have an implementation of the capability receiver pattern that is documented on flow.com that basically says we have a separate key, and the only thing that key can do is to teleport. Actually, we have 100 of them, or 200 if you count the boxes, that can do this operation. But it's only that address that has the ability to do that, and that's secured via the capability model of Flow. So here is the slide I was looking for earlier, the metadata slide. It was just moved one slide away. So on-chain metadata, why I think it's so important. And it's really quite simple in nature. You have two core methods that all NFT have. You can get your views, so how can I view you? And then you can resolve that view and get data back. That's all there is to it. And the key here is a type, and a type on Flow contains both the address and the name of a contract, so you know that it's unique. And this pattern has just proven to be very flexible and very powerful. For instance, for discoverability, with the recent addition of storage iteration, suddenly knowing all of your NFTs, that was a really hard problem before, to know all your NFTs. If you couple storage iteration with these methods, creating like a gallery of all the images that you own of all your NFTs is suddenly very easy to do. And this basically also comes back to composability that I talked about in the previous slide, where the transaction can compose multiple operations into it. Because imagine if your metadata were off-chain. If your metadata was off-chain, that's the norm on Ethereum, right? The ERC 721, you have a JSON, or the OpenSea standard, you have a JSON file that is in IPFS or in CDN or whatever, and you can go to that and get that data. But if you are to do that on Flow, then you need to go off-chain every time you do that. And let's say you want to fetch 100 items, and then you want to fetch the metadata for all of those. That's like 101 calls right there. And then you are suddenly going to run a new transaction on Flow for all of that. So it just gets complex. It's much simpler and more composable to have than metadata on-chain. And it leaves you with a richer on-chain experience. So that's why I kind of, for fun, coined the term SODA a while ago. So a simple on-chain distributed application. So feel free to use that if you want to. I think it's quite funny, but that's just me. So that was the cadence part. There is way more to come on the cadence part, by the way. We have lots of things in development, but today is not to talk about that. Today is to talk about what we have done thus far and how we have gotten there. So the last technical piece that we need to discuss is the back end of the teleporter. So I'm going to beam you up and let you just understand a little bit more about how that works. And before I do that, I just want to say that there are many ways of creating a bridge. I know of 2 other different patterns that Deborah knows about and have discussed for how to do this. This is just a pattern that we thought out and how we can do it. And I think it has lots of merits, but you can judge for yourself. And if anybody wants to discuss it, I'm really happy to do so. So the trusted bridge, as I call the pattern, it's based on 2 core principles of trust. The first principle is that the minting process itself is run by a trusted actor. So it's a separated process that should have as little integrations as possible to make it secure. And in our case, it only listens to the Ethereum chain and writes to the Flow chain. That's the only thing it does. And it has some logic in it as well, of course. But it's really a quite simple piece of machinery that just listens to event, reacts on those, and then does something on the other chain. So that's the first aspect of trust, that the minting process itself is trusted. So it's not untrusted. That would be the user doing it himself. The other part of trust is the handshake, as I call it, or that users need to trust. So it's very important that in order to not be scammed or not have any issues, you have to build trust. So you need to sign something on Flow that says who you are on ETH. And then you sign something on ETH that says who you want to send it to on Flow. Because then you can shake hands. You have a handshake, you have trust both ways. So the handshake could go like this, right? This is a very simple explanation of how it works. First, the user over here will log in to MetaMask, right, on Ethereum. Then he will log into Flow. So now he's logged into 2 different chains in the same application, and you have 2 different addresses. So then you sign a transaction on Flow that sets up your storage slot, as I like to call it, on Flow, and then adds your related address. And that's another little segue I can take that's very different on Ethereum compared to Flow. That is, if you want to give a user something on Flow, they have to set up something first, because they are in control of their storage. So they need to create the container that fits the thing you want to give them, sort of. There are other things. It's a contract called Lost and Found by Floaty, for instance, where you can put things in and have them claim it later. But the normal pattern is that you create the storage slot first. So when that is done, you have now a related account on Flow that says that this account on here knows who this one is, right? Then you run a transaction on Ethereum. So here, that's number 5 here. You run this transaction that contains the Flow address in an event. And once that event is picked up and processed, then you will have trust both ways. So then you are secure. That's the definition. Note that user number 1 and number 2 doesn't have to be the same user. If you want to have a chat with somebody and just asynchronously send each other your addresses, the teleporter allows for that concept. So let's say that the Poopie wanted to send something to Pranksy. Poopie could add Pranksy's Flow account, and Pranksy could add Poopie's Ethereum account, and then they could actually do that teleportation, and it would be as secure as the other approach. So the machinery itself then that goes and runs, that's basically just a daemon that runs a loop. It reads events from Ethereum and keep track of them and make sure that it doesn't miss any of them and replay them and all that sort of machinery. Then it has a mapping logic that maps the incoming event to assets on Flow. And then we have the idempotency check. So we basically check that this thing hasn't happened before, because it can happen, right? That things will be replayed or things like that. We actually have a fallback job that we can run manually if there are issues, where we actually try it again. And that's one place where the idempotency check is very important. And then we have a trust check, and that is the check I've been talking about a couple of times now, where you actually check that the find related accounts actually have the match that you are. So when that is done, then we mint to your Flow account and emit lots of events that you can track to show what you got and all of that. So the entire thing is quite simple. I would say is written in Go, powered by Go Ethereum and Overflow. It has worked pretty well for the duplications that we have done thus far. So, Jordan, what is a duplication?
Thanks, B-Man. For context, we have 10,000 Doodle NFTs on Ethereum. We call this our original collection, or OG. Not too long ago, we gave people a new NFT called a duplicator. This NFT lives on Ethereum. When we did that, we were still in the process of assessing chains. So we were looking at other EVMs, layer 2s, Flow as well. So we knew that we would have potentially this problem of, if people want to use the thing that we gave them and their doodle, we need to figure out how to get data from one chain to the next. So a duplicator duplicates. For its first use case, we allowed people to use their duplicator on their doodle or somebody else's doodle, assuming they have permission via approvals, to then receive NFTs, wearables on the Flow blockchain. So that is, the first use case of the teleporter, and I really have to thank the .find team. They're absolutely brilliant, and it was as Bjartek said, it was good to have like-minded people who have the same passions and desires to make things on the blockchain matter and do it in a resilient way. I'm not saying we're covering all the edge cases, but it's good to put checks in not only on Ethereum, but also on Flow to make sure that we're covering our bases. So the doodles and the duplicators, after they're used, they stay on Ethereum. We have a separate smart contract on ETH that shows doodles and duplicators that have been used in duplication. So they get marked essentially. This means that, as new use cases arise, we can do the active duplication. Where the destination is, who knows? Next slide, please. And the second use case, the second use case for teleporting is an NFT that we sold called the Genesis box. It contains wearable NFTs. This NFT lives on Ethereum again. And the fun fact is, through our extensive FAQs, terms of service, and documentation in the Genesis box, we explicitly said that the contents of it may be on another blockchain, and that chain is TBD. And now we're here, thanks to the .find team, to say that these NFTs are on Flow. The main difference here is that Genesis boxes will be burned, so they'll effectively be removed from the circulating supply on Ethereum, as opposed to marked, because Genesis boxes are a one-time consumable. And yeah, Genesis boxes are coming next and coming soon. Thanks, Bjartek.
So the last kind of piece we have here is kind of to talk a little bit about the future of Doodles. And we don't have that much here because we kind of want to leave this a little bit of a mystery, but we can just say that the future for Doodles on Flow is long. There's lots of plans. But as Luca mentioned in his talk, we actually have started talking to Flowatar about a standard for composable NFTs. So technically, it's going to be possible for different container NFTs to contain different components. And yeah, go on.
Yeah, just to interject. Yeah, I think Flowatar was the first, or one of the first to do this on Flow, and there are a lot of there's a trend in the PFP NFT space of allowing users to customize their NFT. People are finding that it's hard to do it if you shipped with a vanilla ERC 721 or a vanilla NFT standard, and you did not think for that future use case or in mind. So I think it's important, as people working in the space with the platforms that we have to be able to contribute to this, because we provide like real use cases, lots of users, lots of feedback, and product and business input as well. So the next thing here is like the interfaces for wearables utility. This is still yet to be defined. And a lot of it is a little bit dependent on the composable NFT standard as well. So there's like a chicken and egg problem here, but we have a lot of ideas there. And the last thing that I added to this is the active duplication. In a way, it allows users to exercise their right to duplicate. In parallel, we created a marketplace on Ethereum that allowed users to commercialize or sell their rights to duplication. So far, that marketplace has done like 200 ETH in sales from doodlers who decided that they wanted to sell that right to somebody else. And that somebody else is somebody who's receiving these NFTs on Flow. And I think that's something that will continue to extend because of its success.
Yeah, so that's basically what we had today. We have some learnings that we can talk about later, or if people doesn't have questions, but if there are questions in there, yeah, then we can start to answer them now.
Yeah, so Brody has a question. Says, bridges seem to be one of the largest attack vectors in the Web3 space. Are there additional attacks that are concerning with the teleporter contracts? And I think in general, if you can go into a bit more detail on the security considerations and how you kind of thought out at the bridge, I think it could be really useful.
Yeah, so I've covered a little bit of this later in the talk, but it's basically, I totally agree. The bridges are it's a very common attack angle, and we have tried to cover a lot of the bases there with having I mean, we have multiple layers of defense. You have the front end on the Ethereum side, it kind of doesn't allow you to pick things, but you could. We have spoken at length about that. We need to have a system that would work even if people use Etherscan or Flowrunner to run their transactions. So Flowrunner is a magnificent tool by Pratel that that can actually, where you can write your own transaction and run them, kind of like just writing a write operation on Ethereum. So, and Poopie himself actually wrote a guide on how you could use these tools to do non-custodial duplication if you want to. And he has done it himself, right? So, so we have tried to create a system that is kind of foolproof. And I have talked quite a lot about resources and Flow that know security quite a lot. They work with security, and to get this process that we have vetted through their kind of systems to say, is this okay? Is it safe enough? So I'm fairly confident that they have covered a lot of the attack vectors. I mean, you can never say never, because if somebody breaks the entire flow chain, then they have broken the entire flow chain. So I can't say, well, take all of them, but quite a lot of them. They have to like break capability permissions basically to be able to break the oracle the way it is written right now.
And so B-Man, I guess what we're saying too, and what part of the question we could address as well is like we are the biggest attack vector here. How we handle our keys, how we run our services, how because we prevent people on Ethereum from duplicating the same doodle via smart contracts. Like the transactions would not confirm. On Flow, we have that registry of duplicated doodles and duplicators that are used as well. But from a product perspective and a business perspective, like this is very much the version 1 of this, and I think there are things that we can do to extend it and make it a little more resilient. But to date, 2,000 plus users have duplicated, tens of thousands of wearables have been created, hundreds of thousands of dollars in wearables have been traded. But yeah, it's definitely a discussion that needs to be had for sure. Thanks for the question.
Another question for both of you. Are third parties encouraged to build on top of Doodles 2? Would building an app to display your wardrobe or a dashboard on Doodles 2 be acceptable as a hackathon project?
Yeah, I think this one goes back to the composability or NFT composable standard. We definitely want people to use wearables in other experiences, and we want people to use doodles in other experiences as well. I think that's one of the biggest like upsides of building in a permissionless environment. And maybe one day the best experience is not built by us, it's built by somebody else. But yeah, we want to definitely encourage that, and we're thinking through how to create an interface for developers to easily plug into and extend the utility of wearables, because it's a win-win for our users as well.
Awesome. And to answer the question on the hackathon specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Poopie, I think for the hackathon itself, it's definitely valid if you want to build on top of Doodles 2, but as you mentioned, there may be more composability tooling and plugins available in the future, right? So it might be a little bit more challenging right now, but I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more composability opportunities later on.
Yeah, exactly that. And the product really isn't released yet. Like this is a preview, a pre-release of the product as well. We have wearables, that are lacking their core utility, which we are building. But yeah, I could see a world where, somebody hacks together Flopatar with a wearable for the art that we provided in the metadata views. Like.
Sweet. And one question from Maroon is, collaborating with the Health Organization for Health and Well-being and Education content. I think this is more on the Doodle side? Would be if you have an answer there.
Yeah, I'm actually like we just onboarded a head of biz dev a few weeks ago, and I'm actually having lunch with a local hospital, children's hospital, just to see opportunities there. But yeah, we're definitely thinking about that. Like I think the appeal of our NFTs and our characters is very broad, and joy is one of our pillars as well. So spreading joy, we can definitely do that on the ground.
Awesome. Wow. A question just came in. What are the top 5 things to make your NFT project as successful as Doodles?
I think
Easy question.
yeah, it's I don't think I could list 5. I think that early on we did a couple stunts, right? We created a gated Discord. We locked our Discord down, and eventually that became the allow list that people know today. But when we did that, there was an intention behind it. It wasn't just to, limit the perception of supply. It was more that we wanted to figure out what our values were as a community, keep our community pre-launch in get them on board with those values and preserve it too. What we didn't want is to do a sale, have 10,000 people come into the Discord, talk about the floor price. We didn't want that. So we closed down our Discord. We invited creatives, meme makers, people who were contributing on Twitter, our developer friends. And we just really had a good pulse on the values that we wanted our community to portray. And that really helped us early on. And of course, like we had, reputation in the space, and we were able to get, some of our friends into the project. But then a lot of our friends didn't join the Discord when we asked them to, like 6 months before launch. So yeah, I think the community is a huge factor of success in building a culture. And I think you see it today with some of the newer projects, and like they'll evoke joy or creativity, or sometimes like FUD. Like they each have their own like spin and style on it, and they'll find users and collectors that can get behind it. Yeah.
Awesome. Bjartek, if you want to get into a little bit of the learnings, I think we have time for it.
Yeah, I can. I have covered some of these before, but I'm just going to reiterate them. Addresses on Flow are different than on Ethereum. Actually, I didn't myself have a lot of experience with Ethereum before I started this project. Flow was my baby blockchain. It was my, like, whatever you call it. I was like a virgin when I came to Flow in 2020, and started on Flow and has been happy on Flow ever since. And as I conversed with many people on the Doodles team, it became apparent to me that that it's very important to know that there's a difference between the way addresses and accounts works on Flow and Ethereum. So these are some of the learnings here. So you don't have the same addresses across networks. They are different. And the address or an account can have many keys, and you can rotate these keys. You can add new ones. You can destroy them. So let's say you have a given breach, right? And one of your keys is leaked. So a private key is leaked. What happens on Ethereum if your private key is leaked? Well, then you have to shut down. It's like a total disaster. The private key of something where all the NFTs live, then everything is rugged, right? You could just lose everything. But on Flow, if you discover that early enough, you can add a new key and then use the new key to remove the old key. And suddenly that old key that you leaked doesn't have any permissions anymore. That opens up things that you need to think about and you need to have in mind. It gives you new capabilities. Some find them frightening and things like that, but they're very powerful, at least. And others can also have many contracts, and you can update the contracts on Flow. That's something that so you can actually make a contract not be updatable. And you do that with revoking the key that has permission to do that on that account. So that's an option, but Cadence is yet to be declared stable. There is an initiative to stabilize Cadence, and it has progressed quite a lot the last year and is progressing even now. And once that is done and Cadence is declared stable, then they promise that they will not break compatibility anymore. So then you can, in fact, get the same semantics as you have on Ethereum, where when you have written a contract, it's there. You cannot change it. But one thing is very important on contracts on Flow is that while you can update contracts, you cannot add or change or delete state in the resources that you create. So if you create an NFT with some fields and you add that to mainnet, you cannot add more fields to that NFT. There is a new initiative called attachments that allows you to attach things to that, but that's still not on mainnet. It's still being developed and discussed. So I advise everybody that are making contracts, stay on testnet or emulator for a long time, iterate on testnet, create lots of things, and make sure that you have the data slots you need when you go to mainnet. We often at Find have this extra map dictionary in a lot of our resources and structs just to store extra data in case we need it. And we have needed it because product can change their mind. And no matter if you tell them that you cannot add state, sometimes they don't think in that way. So it's very important to think about that. Again, composability, I've been over this before, but it doesn't hurt to repeat it again. You can compose write operations and read operations into transactions and scripts. And one really cool thing about a transaction on Flow is that it will revert all state changes if it panics. So you don't have to keep track of that and resetting things. If everything but the last operation in a transaction succeeds and the last instruction fails, then the entire thing will change, will panic. So it's like a distributed transaction in that sense. And challenges, I mean, on Flow, there are challenges on Flow. Everything is not better than Ethereum, I would say. For instance, as I know Josh mentioned in his talk, knowing where everything is a challenge on Flow. It's also, he actually mentioned that it's something that's good for security because you can't hack everything, right? You have to then hack all the accounts. But actually creating like a registry of everybody who owns a Doodle currently is a lot harder on Flow than it is on Ethereum because there all of those numbers or IDs are just in the contract. But it is totally solvable. I just want people to know that this is a challenge that you need to know that exists on the Flow blockchain. And that was the last slide. So are there any more questions?
There are a couple. I see Poopie's answering some of them in writing. I would say one interesting one, and I think this is something that you can also maybe chime in on, Bjartek, is Poopie talked about how building a community was a critical part of Doodle's success. I think building it is just the first step. How do you keep it engaged, and how do you retain your community? And I'd love to hear both of your opinions on this.
How do you retain a community? Yeah, Jordan, you want to start?
Let me take this. It's a very hard question. Like we could talk for weeks about this, really.
Yeah.
There's the current space is made up of many different personas. Personas could be informed by motivation. Or is it extrinsic? Is it intrinsic? How they arrived, what they see in your product. I think that it's important to get your current community on board with the idea that bringing 1 million more people into our ecosystem when it's ready is a good thing. It's a net positive for all, you know, rising tide lifts all boats. But I think like with Web3 specifically, there is, you know, that desire, aspiration for you as a community member to influence and have a stake in the roadmap and be able to talk to the founders, be able to express, you know, your content or discontent publicly. And news in the space spreads so fast. I think that like for us personally, like we're taking a new look at things. Like we're working on, you know, not just the flow roadmap, but the ETH roadmap. And, you know, part of that can be collaborative with the community. And yeah, I don't want to set any like expectations or share too much right now, but building in public, just Google it. I think that's a desire of the current, you know, current space and community. And, you know, these people will be the handholders and advocates for more people as they join. It's similar to like CryptoKitties in 2017. Like a lot of the people who dove really deep into CryptoKitties are now the founders of like OpenSea, you know, like of different projects. I think yeah, balancing the needs of and wants of the community is important.
Thank you. Yeah. We have 2 minutes left. Bjarte, did you want to add anything to that question, or?
I don't think I have anything to add really. I personally believe in having having a clear roadmap, setting clear expectations for what you want to do, and just deliver on that, and keep creating things, right? Keep the new things trickling in, right, to show that you're alive. And yeah.
Awesome.
This was great. Andrea and Bjarte, thank you for having me. Yeah, we're really excited to continue building the product on Flow and get the best minds like, you know, .find on our side to help us. And thanks everyone for attending, and thank you for your questions. If I missed anything, please just at me at Poopie on Twitter and I'll respond to you.
Thank you, Poopie.
Thank you both. Thanks, Bjarte, and thanks, Poopie. It was great learning opportunity for everyone. I know there's a lot of a lot of projects that are interested in going multi-chain, and allowing a small glimpse into how that was possible with Doodles 2, I think was really useful, and hopefully sets some great you know, best practices as well as guidelines for projects tackling it next. Thank you so much. And this video will be available on YouTube. So if you missed the live webinar, hello from YouTube, and see you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.